A few years ago, I found out I had a brand new interest. Girls. No, don't worry. That's not going to be the topic of my speech today. To be more specific, I'm interested in how guys and girls should interact before marriage. A few years ago, I started on a journey of soul-searching, Bible reading, and reading of different authors on the subject. Now, I won't be able to tell you everything that I've learned, but I want to tell you about the one area of purity that's the most convicting to me. The foremost idea that formed my view of purity is the fact that I can love my wife today, even though I have no idea who she is. So today I want to talk to you about the fact that she is alive, how I can honor her, and finally why I honor her. A basic idea popped into my head one day. If God's future for my life is marriage, then the person I'm going to one day marry is somewhere in the world right now. I'm still not sure if this is a revolutionary idea or one I should have figured out long ago. I learned about it even more from Eric Ludy in his book, When God Writes Your Love Story. Mr. Ludy writes, quote, "For the first time in my life, I was beginning to realize that if God's plan and purpose for my life really was marriage, then the person I was going to one day marry was most likely somewhere on this great planet. And at that moment, she was doing something. I was swallowed up in one gigantic thought. She's alive. I wonder what she's doing." Then it hit me. She'd better not be with a guy. My mind was filled with the grotesque picture of some geekish Val Kilmer lookalike, slinking his arms, snake-like, around my future wife's shoulder, and whispering in his disgusting voice, "Doesn't the moon look peachy, babe?" Then, as if it could get any worse, I imagined this sweet talking turkey puckering his unbridled, oversized lips and kissing my future wife. My lips twisted into a crazed snarl, and my eyes boiled with fury. My right hand formed a pulsating fist, and I smacked my left hand with savage force. I was ready to kill this guy. He was touching something that was solely mine. Mr. Ludy goes on to finish the scene perfectly. And then in a way that only God can, he nudged my heart and slipped me a little note. This imaginary note read, "You desire purity in your wife, don't you?" "You better believe it I do," I trumpeted in response. "I want my wife to be pure!" "That's great," the note continued. "I'm glad you're so interested in purity. I'm quite a fan of it myself." It was then that I learned the life lesson. Just think, if you're so interested in purity, how much more do you think your wife is interested in purity in you? So when I came to the realization that she was alive, I decided I had to do everything in my power to honor her, and in two areas specifically, in the physical realm and in the emotional realm. This means refraining from any sort of physical impurity, and a commitment not to give my heart to just anyone who comes along. My basic rule for myself is not to do or be anything to any young lady that I wouldn't do or be if I was married today. Here's what it looks like in life. In the physical realm, the most common Christian teaching is abstinence before marriage. I completely agree with and implement this in my life. But I think far too many young people follow this rule and think that they have all their bases covered. I think we need to dig a little deeper. When Paul writes to the church at Ephesus in Ephesians 5:3, he says, "But among you, there should not be even a hint of sexual immorality or of any kind of impurity." Not even a hint. And yet I think far too many young people hint at impurity every day, even if they never go all the way. So I think to stay in line with Ephesians 5:3, there's a simple question we can ask ourselves. Whenever I'm around young women, I ask myself, would I act like this if my wife was watching? And if I can't answer in the affirmative, my guess is I've crossed the line. Our hearts can be treated in much the same way. I'm sure you've noticed how we young people have a great desire for an intimate, emotional connection with each other. I see my peers getting paired up all the time. But as a whole, the majority of teenage romances don't end in marriage. And here's where the trouble is. The human heart is a very fragile thing. And after just a few heartbreaks, it'll become calloused and more reserved in order to make the next heartbreak less painful. And a calloused heart is a heart that can't give itself entirely to anybody. Proverbs 4:23 states, "But above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life." So in order to guard my heart and save it for my wife, I've decided to never give it to anybody but her. I've decided to only ever have one girlfriend, my wife. Now, I've only been able to scratch the surface of what I learned on my soul-searching journey. 10 minutes is simply not enough time to even begin hashing out God's will for Christ-centered guy-girl relationships. I've just told you about the area of purity that's the most convicting and encouraging to me. I'll conclude with the revelation God gave me. In the same way that God nudged Derek Ludy earlier, he did the same thing to me. It kind of reminded me of the end of the VeggieTales movie, where Bob looks up at Larry and asks, "Okay, Larry, what did we learn today?" God did the same thing to me. "Okay, Ben, what did you learn today? But more importantly, what are you going to do with the information?" I think if I can break down God's nudge into the words of a conversation, this is what it would sound like. "Ben, you agree with me that these humans I've created called females are very attractive people." "Yeah, I do." "But you realize the damage you can cause if you misuse their bodies in any way?" "I do." "So do you promise not to lay your hands on any young woman who is not your wife, in any way that will compromise her, and that you will save your body for your wife alone?" "I do." "Ben, you've realized, just like I have, that there's a great pleasure and an intimate, emotional connection with these young women I've created." "I do. But you understand that any romance on your part prior to marriage will only detract from that young lady's intimacy with both me and her future husband." "I do. So do you promise to refrain from any emotional intimacy prior to marriage, and that you will save your heart for your wife alone?" "I do. And in everything that you do you promise to stay true to your wife, knowing that every facet of your life will one day belong to her?" "I do." It slowly dawned on me that these words were vaguely familiar. "I then take you." I'd heard something like this once before. "To have to hold from this day forward." In fact, I'd heard something like this multiple times before. "To love and to cherish." I knew where this was from. "Till death do us part." These questions I was answering sounded strangely similar to marriage vows. And then it hit me that they were marriage vows in almost every way, shape, and form. They had all the basic premises. Save yourself for your wife and no one else. Is this just some kind of weird coincidence or what? I don't think so. Think about it. Nothing I'm going to promise my wife at the marriage altar has to start there. Today it is within my power to promise her my whole self, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, for as long as we both shall live. For as long as we both shall live. That time begins now. That time doesn't start the minute I kiss the bride. I'm supposed to cherish her for as long as we both shall live. Even if I might not even meet my wife for another 5 or 10 years, I can still promise her everything that I will promise when I can see and touch her in person. So there alone, by myself, with only God as my witness, I made vows to the woman of my dreams, who for me And who knows, maybe at the same time, somewhere across the stretches of space, some special young woman did the same thing for me.